Farming for one specific 3-cost, on-set, elemental damage echo is a recurring nightmare for many players. There's a reason why Kuro is handing out morphable elite class echoes as a premium event reward. Finding these coveted drops in the overworld comes with a unique set of challenges. First, 9 main stats you don't want. Second, a 20% base drop rate with a 4-kill pity. And third, a limited number of spawns in the overworld. The fastest way for a player to hop into this 3-cost echo grind is to open up their databank and begin tracking the desired mob, which will immediately track the closest TD and continue tracking after each kill. I'm here to discuss today some of the nuances within Wuthering Waves' tracking system, and how its design and limitations have changed in the most recent updates to streamline the grinding experience. As a disclaimer, these conclusions were made after a very long farming session, following that most recent update. The first issue with databank tracking in prior patches was the limited number of mobs you had access to. After a session of tracking 3-costs, you would get the overhead message that there were no monsters left to track. Players could be led to believe that they farmed every single one of that tracked monster and had to wait for a daily reset or co-op to continue farming for those 3-costs. In some cases, this was actually wrong. This is because the tracking system had a set number of mobs that a player could track each day, and would stop that tracking once they met a threshold of around 20 to 30 kills. If you're a player who had spent the better half of an hour farming mobs with no usable drops, this was one of the most frustrating messages to receive. Fortunately, this system has changed. In the current version of the game, players can track a specific type of elite until every single mob of that type has been slain. This allows players, in some cases, to double the number of mobs that they would usually farm with the older system. Elites like the Havoc Dreadmane, Spearback, and Stonewall Bracer spawn in very high quantities every daily reset, and can provide some of the most essential pieces for character builds in the game, providing pieces for sets like Sun-Sinking Eclipse, Moonlit Clouds, Rejuvenating Glow, and Lingering Tunes. The latter 3 sets are some of the most flexible in the game, with a lot of pieces shareable between key support, sub-DPS, and main DPS units, and can dramatically increase your resource efficiency as you tackle endgame content like the Tower of Adversity Hazard Zone or hologram bosses. While this update has undoubtedly streamlined the grinding experience for some select elites, there are many others that saw little updates with this change. A majority of elites in the overworld will spawn with less than 30 overall mobs. Those tenured with slaying the Cyan or Violet Feathered Herons, for example, might notice no difference in their daily farming experience, due to the fact that there are only about 20 or so spawns for either of these elites in the overworld. This update unfortunately does nothing to help you get closer to that electro-damaged purple heron. My condolences. But there's always the upside of future map expansions from version 1.1 onwards, potentially increasing the number of spawns for these units, and in turn making this update applicable to those mobs in the future. On the flip side, this update has introduced new opportunities when it comes to OneCost Echoes. With certain OneCost TDs numbering in the literal hundreds on each daily reset, the improved tracking system could allow players to focus their grind on the following echoes. Despite being 1-costs, these TDs can drop only 2 potential attributes, rather than the 3 you traditionally see on other 1-costs. For example, if you're looking to gear a Havoc main DPS on the Havoc set, selectively focusing on the Young Roshroom, Excavate, and Havoc Warrior each daily reset will give you the highest chances of obtaining that on-set attack Havoc Echo, as there is only one other attribute these enemies can drop. With 124 Excavate spawns, 92 Young Roshroom spawns, and 128 Havoc Warrior spawns daily, time is pretty much the only limiting factor now to getting a great set of 1-cost echoes. However, it's important to note that there are naturally some downsides to this updated system. there's a lot more potential for burnout. Tackling all of these spawns in a single day is something that will take a player hours. You can also have horrible luck like me, who spent over 40 minutes killing all 60 Havoc Dreadmains on the map with no usable drops at all. The new tracking system has given players a lot more power when it comes to their farming. But players also have to practice responsibility to ensure that they limit the amount of personal frustration that this system can have. It's all RNG at the end of the day. Here are some tips that I have to limit that frustration. First, prioritize mobs that let you gear multiple characters at once. For example, if my Gion and Havoc Rover both need new equipment, it's a great idea to prioritize the young Roshroom instead of the two aforementioned mobs, as the only way you can lose on the Echo drop is if it rolls defense or HP as the main stat. You increase your chance of a good drop from 1 out of 6 to 2 out of 6, a huge upgrade. Second is to utilize a third-party interactive map along with map markers on your own game client to identify where there are multiple groups of enemies that can all drop a potential Echo you're grinding for. There are many spots, for example, like in the Whining Aches' Mire, where both Kerpuffs and young Roshrooms will spawn in the same area, letting you get even more efficiency on your grind as both of these enemies drop the same type of Echo. And third, take a break from farming the overworld and spend some time in the Tacet Fields. In this day and age, it can be difficult to grind for hours every single day on low difficulty mobs. You don't have to make as much progress as possible every day to have a well-built account. Pace yourself for the long run and avoid burnout. Hopefully, this overview was helpful in highlighting the biggest winners, Echo-wise, with the stealth buff that Kuro has applied to the tracking system. Echo farming from my initial tests has been streamlined in a way that heavily benefits those looking for specific sets and specific monsters. But there are still many elites that haven't quite benefited from this change. However, like I mentioned before, there is always the possibility that future map expansion will add more spawns of specific elites in the new areas. I am personally praying that many of the elites numbering in the 20s will have their spawns doubled or potentially tripled in future version updates. For now, best of luck on those 20% drop rates, 10 possible main stats, and chance of a purple Echo. You'll get an Electro Heron one day. Peace out.